I'm not telling you anything you don't know when I say that small changes can make a big difference. Taking the stairs instead of the escalator, it can do wonders for your vitality. Hanging out the laundry instead of whacking it in the dryer saves energy, gets you out in the sunlight, gets you moving your body. Turning your phone off, putting it in another room for an hour before bed, apparently that can lead to way better sleep. I'm yet to stick to that one. I tried it once. I really should try it more than once. But what if I told you that you could change your life quite radically by eliminating one simple word from your vocabulary? This week's guest did just that. How different her life became, it's really quite striking. You taught me a long time ago when we started Breakfast Radio together, you said how you feel about how many minutes, not hours, minutes of sleep you've had is how you'll feel.
I used to Google, how many athletes had won gold medals on little sleep. Like, the people can achieve it, like, people go to war and they've had little sleep. Like, you can do it, but if you are gonna just become so preoccupied by it, I'm like, once you look at your Fitbit and you realize how little sleep you've had, all of a sudden you feel tired, where before you were fine. There's so many times you would have gone out to clubs back in the day and party all night and then rock up to work and you would have been fine because it was your own fault. But now all of a sudden when we're sort of controlled by alarms and work, we just feel more tired. So I always go, we can't indulge in it because that makes me feel worse.
It's really clever, and there's in more recent times there's science behind how you feel about exercise or how you feel about a task dictates your body's response to that. Like if you're training and you go, "Oh fuck, I hate cardio," your body won't
Yes.
respond, and you may as well not really do it. But if you go, "Oh, this is hard, but I can do hard things," your body responds to it in a positive way and it adapts.
100%. I got rid of should ages ago because it does not serve me. And I feel words are so important. I really do. And the way that I guess I parent has been really like, I'll never say to the kids, don't drop that because that's just ridiculous. So I'll say, hold it with two hands. So I've always done that mentality because all of a sudden when you go, don't drop it, don't drop it, don't drop it, like you keep telling yourself that and you're so scared of it. But if you like, hold it with two hands, and that's more of a productive way. So I got rid of like, I should go to the gym. I could say, I can't be fucked going to the gym, but I'm gonna challenge myself. So that's my way of going, "Oh, okay, yeah, challenge yourself. Come on, Abby,
How
let's
did
see
you
how you
get
go."
getting the tyranny of shoulds is one way of putting it. Also, must fits in there, and I've heard it termed as
Mm.
that you can get caught up with chronic masturbation. Um,
Is that what it's called?
it's great, right? How
Yeah.
when did you realize that the word should was causing a problem in your life?
I went through a lot of different therapy over my years, and I've had, different issues. So I feel like I'm so blessed with a really expensive mind because that's how much psychologists have been paid for it. You know what I mean? Sitting on the couch, I feel like I go, oh, now I'm at the point where I was like, yeah, and how do you feel about that, to the psychologist? So I feel like throughout that, I don't know at what point, but I became a little bit more fascinated with not just psychiatry as I was going through it, but also life coaching. And that has been something where for me, I kind of go, I wanted to know that I was going through a problem, but it wasn't who I was, if that makes any sense. So I needed to always find a more positive aspect. And for me, I guess life coaching and the way we say things to ourselves became more important. So it must have been around about in my mid 20s, but I feel the older I've got, the more important it's been to me.
Was it hard to get should out of your life at
Oh,
first?
of course I do. I still stuff up sometimes. I'm like, oh, I should go. And I was like, oh, no, 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 wait a minute. I am going to tackle the washing. Do you know what I mean? Or I wanna get through the washing so I can do this. So it's not just about what you're saying out loud, but it's also saying to yourself. So I constantly trip up. Even though we know all this, you screw up all the time, and I think that's just the ability to go, "Okay, cool, a reset."
In your example, you completed the task, but it's also an opportunity to take responsibility for I'm going to sit here and just watch an episode of CSI. I'm going
100%.
to not do that task
Yeah,
and owning it, like understanding fully it'll mean I have to do it later, but I am
yeah.
owning this moment and knowing that it's going to have to get done, but I'm not going to do it right now rather than I find often if you own the thing, whether you either your action or inaction, and once you take responsibility for it, well, then it's a little less weighty and has a little less weird.
Well, when I first, really suffered with eating disorders, everything was a punishment and reward. And you kinda get rid of the rewards because everything's with the reward, I guess, was on the scales, but I really forgot to enjoy things, and I really didn't find that enjoyment, and I guess recovering from that, you kinda go, "Oh my god, I really love eating this cake," and for me, that's when I kinda go, I'm going to fully absorb it and enjoy it, and there's no guilt, so, yeah, 100%, if you wanna watch that TV show, then you do it and you enjoy it and you don't go, "What I should be doing."
You have been quite open about a lot of the things that have happened in your life. Well, I'd love to talk about the kids later on,
Yes.
but you mentioned the eating thing, and that's a really tricky one. When we're young, it starts to happen to people around us, and we don't quite understand it. Once it starts happening to your friends' kids, a lot of people again don't understand it.
Mm.
I've dated someone who was in that space. I didn't understand it.
So I've never spoken to anyone talking about I've never actually spoken to anyone about what it's like to date someone, because I've always been absorbed with being that person.
Um, it's well, so I had the good fortune. My life's been so lucky. I always seemed to get the lesson that I needed to deal with the heavy situation right before
Yeah,
I
right.
dealt with the
Yeah.
heavies. So I dated this woman who was she was a model, and she told me, things to look out for, the shape of a voice box, or the
Yes.
rotting of the cuticles on the fingernails,
Or the big scar if you got like, if you get like a scratch or it looks like some sort of, laceration.
on the
Yeah,
knuckle
yeah,
from the teeth grabbing the knuckle.
yeah,
Elbows, she talked to me about, that's how you can kind of really identify if someone's muscle mass is so low. And I didn't know
yeah,
any of that. And then, we'd go to the beach and she'd go, yes, no, yes, oh. Oh. And then so not long after that, I dated this another woman, and oh, there it was. There
mm,
was, this person smoked. So the yellowing fingers was, oh, no, no, it's the cigarettes. Okay.
mm,
Um, and, getting up in the middle of a meal, gone to the bathroom,
mm,
then, coming back with, wiping the mouth, like, "Oh, right, okay."
yeah.
It's I mean, it's a symptom. I think that's for me, the biggest misunderstanding of this sort of stuff is that it's a symptom of an otherwise deeper issue. It's not the issue. That's for me on the outside looking at it. What do you think people's biggest misconception about eating disorders is?
I don't normally say this because I was diagnosed before it was cool. But I was diagnosed in year 8 with having ADD, which is what it was called back then. Now a lot of people know it as ADHD. And I was not taking a medication for a long time. And then when I got to year 10, the school was like, look, she really needs to go on medication. So I was on dexamphetamines. And for me, it helped so much with my ADHD, but it didn't help with being a teenage girl who wanted to keep her weight down. Because you, if I'm being honest, had just given me a magic pill. And I became a little bit obsessed with that, you know what I mean? Keeping my weight down. And then when I stopped taking them is when my weight blew up and it was just a real focus. But at the same time, like you were saying, it is a symptom where I didn't get into the university degree that I liked. I was going out with a guy that was absolutely terrible for me. I didn't know what I wanted to do with my life. And all of those things you do realize you're kind of like, well, wait a minute, the one thing that I can obsess with, the one thing that I can focus on, I guess, will be my weight. Yeah, of what I can eat and what I can't eat, and it just becomes this overwhelming obsession where I felt like I didn't see much out of it, and you've got these pictures of what you think someone with an eating disorder would have, but you become really good at hiding it. You know, it's like a functioning alcoholic. You believe the lies and you can carry on and you just become a very good liar, and that's what I say about that I did become self-absorbed with what was going on with me, and I guess not caring how it affected other people around it or not caring about the actual lies. I just didn't feel one bit of guilt with it because it was just sort of, I guess, trying to keep me going and me functioning.
And these things work until they don't.
Yeah.
What was the moment, when you thought, "I'm gonna have to do something about this"?
I had sort of gone on and off to counselling. My mum knew about it and it was really hard for her, but it was a bit of a taboo. I didn't talk about it with the rest of my family, even though they knew. So mum went to counselling for it and she was like, you promise you got to get better. And I just, I wanted to kind of live normally, if that makes any sense. I didn't want to live with the secrecy. And I just was like, it came to a point where I was like, I really need to go and get help. And it was finding a psychologist that I actually liked because I'd been to a lot of different psychologists. I stopped one psychologist because I went in there and she's like, what would it mean for you to be fat? And I was like, whoa, bitch, you want to make me fat? I got to leave. I got to leave. And I never went back to see her. And then I saw this guy that was like, and I remember these people like it was yesterday. He was really tall and really thin. I was like, he's my man. He understands. And then he was fully booked out. So I could only get a few appointments and I couldn't get back to see him. And then I felt completely and utterly, I guess, rejected by him. And then I saw a guy that I ended up going to see him 3 times a week. And he was in Sydney. And I would sit there and talk about, I guess, so many different aspects of it. And I remember at one point he said to me, you're going to have to turn around. Now, whether I was boring him and he just wanted to sleep, but he was like, you change your answer depending on my reaction. So I really need you to face the other way, when you're sitting and you're talking to someone. So I had to sit and do my counselling sessions with my back to him. Like I said, he probably wanted to fall asleep. But it was really quite interesting of him saying, you're always in such a pleaser mode that you're trying to wait and sense my reaction before you go on. And I need you to tell me your truth. So I did a lot of counselling sessions like that. And then it came to a point where I was like, I feel like I'm done now. And I'm not going to say it's a big savior moment, but I did meet my husband and I would have been in the first few days I told him about it. And I remember him just grabbing my hand and he's like, well, we're not going to do that anymore. You know what I mean? I've got you. And I remember thinking, what a weird thing to say for a guy that I didn't think would have any understanding from it. But his stepsister was anorexic. So, it was kind of just a simplistic way to do it. And I'm not saying that is, I'd done all the work beforehand, but I was like, I just want to find another way. And I'm not saying there hasn't been slip ups throughout that time, but I'm that person now where it goes, okay, cool. I need to really sort of put everything that is bothering me into perspective and really have ways of coping with stress, and I've spoken to you about it before. Like, you're not a good guy if you don't exercise. You're not a good guy if you don't get enough sleep. But we always presume that they are things that we can sort of cope with. You know what I mean? So I guess I've just got my ways of what I do throughout stress. And if anything's going wrong at a drop of a hat, I'll go and see someone about it.
And you're right. I have this whole list I made it a whole list of all the flags that I passed on the way to getting terribly ill.
Mm.
And it's about 20 of them. But if I get any more than 3,
Yeah,
I
wow. Yeah.
know what 3 weeks from now is going to be. So I'm like,
Yeah.
up, and I pull stumps and I know exactly what I need to do. It took a while before I figured that part out. And I
Mm.
needed to get a bit better because it's hard to address a brain that doesn't think well with a brain that doesn't think well. So it takes a little while.
See, I would always like to just bottle the knowledge or the feelings that you have and give it to younger people so they can have some sort of shortcut. You know what I mean? Like, I know that we learn it in a time when we need to be able to learn it. But sometimes I just wish that you didn't have to go through that much crap. It would be nice to just be to have some sort of make it shorter. Do you know what I mean? Bottle all that and be able to give it to people so they didn't have to go through that much.
That's what any older generation does. That's
Yeah,
how any of us learned anything.
yeah,
Anybody in any job you or I did that said, "Hey, Abby, you've got a whole lot of, raw this, do a little bit of that," which I had to learn the hard way, and they've given you that shortcut.
yeah.
And then you now have to action that, and you have the learning yourself. So, yeah. Even this conversation, people listening to 2 people talk about this sort of stuff might be the first time someone's heard it,
Mm.
and talk about it as like, "Oh, yeah, it happens a lot. It happens a lot." And it's a really tough one because you gotta eat.
You still have to, yeah. And then I didn't talk about it for years and years because I was like, oh, it's not attractive. I know that sounds thing, but it's so complex as well. But the one thing I feel like being authentic and coming back to Scott, that was the one thing that he always was. He never is a guy that's ever had any masks. And I feel like throughout my life, I always did because whether it was that pleasing mode or whether it was that wanting to be liked, where he genuinely is what you see is what you get. And I find that is incredibly rare.
That you had that diagnosis early is, it's great because, it gave your parents, I guess, a bit of a strategy, and it gave you an idea about why it is that you are what you are. But it makes perfect sense that you have the career you have and that you found yourself in the places that you found yourself and you saw the opportunities that you did because you've got a brain that does that. When was the first time you kind of noticed that, oh, I kind of get places that other people don't get, or I get opportunities that other people don't get? 'Cause I'm not going to say you're a hustler. You're not that. You, but you do identify there's a place that I can add value. Boom, and you just find yourself there. And you were pretty young when you found that, right?
Yeah, I enjoy the work. I really enjoy the work in every aspect of it because I feel like in so many places in my life, I've never been the star. I've never been like, I went to drama school and I remember I just always cruised by, or I was always at the radio station just doing the average jobs. And I never really wanted to be the star or the main focus. I really enjoyed being the glue and just being the person that's always there. Um, so I mean, from a young age, I did do acting, and I kind of go, I really enjoyed that. But as soon as it got a little bit too much, or did you want this main role? I'll be like, no, I don't want that. Um, so I feel like I've really been obsessed with the work, not the show. And I don't know if that's because if you are the star, then you feel like there's way too much pressure on you. But in every place that I kinda go, I've put myself in, the one thing that's always familiar is just connections. I really enjoy dealing with people. I enjoy trying to bring out the best in people, and that's what I always say, that I've sort of put myself in situations where I just always like being the glue in situation. Maybe it's because I always wanna be in the middle. I hate walking with my friends on the side. I'm constantly in the middle. In a photo, I'm in the middle. I've got this fear of being in the outer. I mean, even I'm like, "Please put my name in the middle of the show instead of Abby and Matt." So I guess in most of my career, I've just liked being a part of it and never wanted to sort of be the star of it. I wanted to be involved in it. It's that ability to have connections.
And when you're doing radio, there's a lot of it. People only hear the voices on the microphone, but unless you're doing a day shift, there's at least two other people for every person you hear.
Yeah.
So it's a big team, and it's a team of people that have to work together to get it done. You obviously had something because you went from Adelaide and you did the Hot 30 for a while,
Well, I used to drive Thunders like you, so that's how I started. I
giving
did a
away the
really
icy cold cans in the movie of the week.
Yeah, so I actually got that job after I did The Mole. Do you remember the first reality show that came to Australia? Do you remember The
It was
Mole?
yeah, yeah. It was a pretty good format. I liked it.
So that was in the year 2000, and I didn't know what I was applying for because literally there was no reality show. So shortly after that, Pop Stars came out, but I didn't know what I was applying for because I applied in an ad in the newspaper. I know, and I was like I heard they were going skydiving, and I was like, "Yeah, cool, I wanna do it." And then went for this weird audition into a hotel room with one guy. Could you imagine doing that now? That's insane. So, I just turned 18, or I think I was just about to turn 18, went for an interview at the Hyatt in Adelaide, and walked in, and there was just these camera setups and a guy, and he's like, "How do you do?" And he's like, "Do you wanna do this psych evaluation?" I had a bit of chat with him and then left, and the next thing I knew, they sent me tickets in the mail and set tickets to go away and film in Tasmania for 2 weeks. My mum was like, "Hell no." And because she said, "Hell no," and I was 18, I was like, "Yeah, see you later. I'm going."
You were runner up on that. Uh,
Yeah. But I hated being known, and this was at a time as well where I was, like, peak eating disorders. So I felt so uncomfortable with then all of a sudden being recognized and being known and
I'm
being
just
talked
I'm just
about in
trying to do
chat
glow in the
rooms.
dark shooters at Heaven too. Leave me alone.
Yeah, yeah. Um, but I guess I felt embarrassed because I was like, "Well, I haven't done anything. I've just been on a reality show, so why would anyone want my signature or want a photo or anything like that?" So after that, when I got an opportunity to work at the radio station, I was like, "Hell yeah, that's doing something. I wanna be able to do that." So I worked doing Thunders, and I just, worked my way up doing shows and realized I didn't like talking to myself on the radio just during a day shift, so I wanted to do a radio show with other people. So, yeah, I just kept working myself up and working my way up until I had a breaky show.
Yeah, but getting to your moving state is a big deal.
Mm.
What would for people who are listening and might be considering what that might be like for them or their kids. Bear in mind, you're quite young when it happened.
Yeah.
What would you say about taking a jump like that, taking a leap like that?
Well, I moved from Adelaide to Sydney shortly after. So I would have been 18 or 19 when I moved there. And I was like the country bumpkin from Adelaide moving to Sydney, which is a big town. And I hated it. Every time I used to go somewhere, they used to go, "You're not from Sydney, are you?" I used to be like, "Why?" And they're like, "You're just a bit too friendly." I was like, "What does that mean?" Because I'm like talking to everyone. I was like, "Great." But I found that incredibly hard. But I also feel like you need to do it because all of a sudden, when you don't have your uh, y your safety net. You know, when your safety net is ripped from you, you really do start living. I can understand why people have that gap year and go overseas, and I feel like that's the time where you really grow, and, that would have been the time when I was going through so much. So I don't think without moving, I wonder whether I would have had that recovery because that's then when I was on my own and realizing, "Geez, wait a minute. God, I'm lonely. God, this is not right. I'm not doing things how I should. Maybe I should go and see someone about it." And plus, it was more like a stigma, not the stigma, because I was like, I don't want to go and see someone. Like, what does that mean? I only hear about shrinks on American TV. Like, I don't want to go and see someone, but I'm in a different city and no one knows me, so whatever. Maybe I will.
Ah, that's useful. Yeah, yeah. But then you got to start, as you mentioned, you got to start dating psychologists until you find one that you click with. Not everyone's for everybody, and that's
Yeah,
okay.
it's weird, isn't it? People always go, "I went and tried someone." I'm like, "No, but you don't gel with someone. That's it. That's fine. You can say, 'No worries. Sorry, it's not gonna work out,' and go on to someone else."
Yeah. When you are, and bear in mind, this is, the early 2000s, right?
Mm.
What was your experience as a woman in radio?
Um, it well, there wasn't many women, really, working there. I guess all the bosses were male. I don't feel like I ever felt uncomfortable because I grew up with older brothers. So I've always been in situations where I'm the only girl, and in my household, I'm the only girl, so I run it. So that's kind of a different shift, isn't it? But that was always my understanding. As the girl, I always, controlled the household. So I never felt uncomfortable with that. It's funny looking back with the comments that were made that would never get away now. Like I remember walking into, the office and they're like, "Geez, Abby, you look like you've lost weight. What are you doing? Sit down." And they would be in a conversation with another radio exec and it would be on speaker and they would be saying the most horrific things. And you're just sitting there dealing with it as if like, yep, that's okay. It's a boy's world. So I look back and I go, there's a lot of things that you would never get away with now. There was a turning point for me when I first started doing breakfast radio where it was always like, hey, the last girl had a baby. So when you have a baby, you're not going to talk about it, just treat it like a second kid. And you're sitting there and you're like, okay, no worries. And you're a bit of a socialite, so let's just go out, and see if we can go out and about. And this is a big publicity thing. And I was like, okay, wait a minute. So this is my first child, and it is a big deal to me. And I'm not a socialite. I'm a bogan who likes the V8s. So I don't know how I'm not going to be myself. And then I was the only girl in this board meeting, and they're talking about what women want because that's the demo. And I remember just thinking, fuck, how amazing. And I actually said, I was like, this is so good that you guys know what women want because I'm a woman and I don't. So I'd love you to be able to tell me more about what I want. And I think I said it with enough sarcasm for them to go, of course, of course, of course, of course. Yeah, yeah, yeah. So what do you, and it was all of a sudden of kind of going, I'm starting to listen. I was like, how crazy is it that we're doing a radio show? Our demo was women and a group of guys was saying what women would want. I thought, how amazing. I thought, how lucky their wives must be.
It's not I had, Hillary Innes, who was, one of my executive producers at the network,
Yeah.
for Bachelors, a couple of years back, and she was talking about when she was at Channel 9 going on a weekend away. There was 2 coaches full. She was the only woman, and
Wow.
a very similar story. They sat there in this big conference room talking about what women want, and she
Yeah.
was the only woman in the room.
It's crazy, and I've also been like, "Oh, don't worry about that. Oh, no, Abby's here. Oh, don't worry, you're one of the boys, aren't you?" You're like, "What is" "No, I'm not actually, no." "Oh, okay, sorry, sorry." Yeah. I've been in, like, executive rooms where I've had, the guys in the room rate the girls from, 0 to 10 in hotness, and you just go, Wow, and it is, you sit there and to be honest, there's so many times where I just smile and laugh it off. I was never the type of person to go, "I'm so sorry." But I feel like I slowly did it in my own way, in my own sarcastic way that you probably know, Osher, where you get that message crossed. Do you know what I mean? Where I'm like, "Oh my god, and what do you think you would be on the scale of 0 to 10?" And they sort of just look at you and you're like, "Okay, that conversation's over."
Yeah, there's a leadership. I don't. They're not. We're talking about a bunch of people that don't. They're not really in the industry.
No, none of them work in the industry anymore, and, but it was also the times. It wasn't just the industry, it was also society. I'm never gonna go to a kid's sporting match anymore where someone's gonna yell out, "Stop running like a girl." Like, it doesn't exist anymore. People don't do that. So I think it was just a reflection of society at the time, but it was a male-dominated industry, and, those times I think have changed, and I think the people that, you know, were acting like that have kind of left.
It's fantastic. To Hans Rosling, who wrote a book called Factfulness, has this line: "Things are bad, but they're getting better."
Yeah.
And it's important to recognize that in the space of your career and my career, such a gargantuan change has
Yeah.
occurred. Like if you're sitting in that boardroom and I were to tell you one day it's going to be close to 50-50, and there's going to be actually someone who comes in with research that will
Yeah.
tell you what the demo is looking for, you'd go, fuck off, these guys will never, you wouldn't have
Yeah.
believed it. But
Yeah.
that's what happens now. And that's amazing. You know, the pace of it is wanting. But
I've spoken to a lot of, women who is still in radio or maybe they've left radio and they get really bitter about it. That's something that's always really bothered me. I've never wanted to get bitter about it because 'cause I'm like, "It's the circumstances that were." I don't ever say that I've worked in a male misogynistic place. I kinda go, "I love males. Males are great." But maybe they were brought up a little bit incorrect at times, and maybe I could have a one-on conversation with their mum about, different ways that they could do it, but that's just not a positive way for me. For me personally,
yeah.
I'm like, there's things that I see that I'm gonna re-educate my boys on. So I've never wanted to be a bitter person. My grandma said, you never pay out an ex and you never pay out a bad workplace because it's a reflection of you and what you could have achieved." And I always stand by that. So I've never wanted to go, "Oh, it was hardworking and bad and they're misogynistic." I've always gone, "Okay, cool. What can we all do better as humans to be able to change that?"
And I, for one, am grateful for that because I wasn't doing very well when we worked together. So at least I know that you probably never talk too much shit about me, at least not to my face.
No, well, no, I would talk shit to your face. No, I never had a
Exactly.
I loved working
No,
with you,
you were very
Oscar.
kind. You gave it to me straight, which I was so grateful for because it was a reflection that I wasn't getting from other people. I got to tell you, that's facts.
I said I would never do it, and I've been offered to do this, a radio show where I'm not face to face with the person. For me personally, I love that connection. I just don't get it. Like, it was really hard for me to do a show from home during COVID. It was home for me to do Zoom calls. I crave that human connection, and I found it really hard because we were doing the shows from different states, and I was never angry at you. I was angry for the people that allowed you to be able to do that because I was like, I want to be, we did trials together and it was brilliant. And you're the most amazing, amazing person to work with because you feed so much energy. But when you were working so hard, you were coming in at any times throughout the show, sleep deprived with technology issues, which I don't like technology issues. It was really, really hard, and we had a lot of times where I guess you were on different medication, and I know that I used to annoy you by saying, "What would happen if you were off those medication?" You were like, "You don't understand, Abby." And for me, that comes from my thing of going, "Okay, cool, I'm a person that is suffering from an eating disorder at the moment. I'm a person who's suffering from an alcohol dependency problem, but that's not who I am. I'm suffering from it at the moment, and I wanna get through it." But you in that state, you were like, "No, this is who I am and you need to accept it." And I was like, "But I don't accept it." And I think that's the only difficult we had. But besides that, I absolutely loved working with you. I think you were the most generous person to work with and so knowledgeable. I mean, obviously your thesaurus is way larger than mine, so I didn't understand a lot of the words that came out of your mouth. But you were going through a lot when we worked together. Would you say
And
that? Like a lot?
yeah, it broke my heart that I wasn't able to do it as well as I wanted to do it.
Yeah, because
It
you're a
broke my
perfectionist.
heart that there was so many things in the way, and I am sad at how I handled some of the, more difficult moments. because my window of operation was so limited, and I was trying. I'd bitten off more than I could chew. I
You were
had
ducking. You know when you got that duck and they're cool on the surface and their legs are paddling underneath?
oh mate, I had committed way too much for the amount of bandwidth that I had, because I was also trying to get really a lot better from someone from being very, very, very sick.
Yeah.
And it was really hard. Like, I was still on antipsychotics when
Mm.
we were working together.
And sometimes I would love you when you were off them, and then you would get annoyed that I was okay with it. Yeah.
And I wrote well, the thing I wrote about that, and that was really, really, really hard for me. There was this one morning where, and I'd told you all the week before. I said, "Listen, I've got to do this thing, but I've got to take a week off my meds. So I might be a bit of a cunt, and I'm really sorry, but it's gonna." And you were all like, "We understand, we understand."
All
And
good. Yeah.
I'd hidden the benzodiazepines with Audrey, and I said, "Only give me one of these if I really need it." I didn't want to know where they were. Didn't want to know where the Valiums were, because me and Valiums are, so just hide them.
Yeah.
And she only really gave it to me once or twice. But that first morning, we were on air at 6. I think by 6:45, you and Stav and Matt had all texted me separately without talking to each other, because we hear each other the whole
Yeah.
time. It's not like we don't hear off air. You'd all texted me separately going, "Fuck, you're funny. Fuck, you're fast. Fucking hell, mate, you're on fucking fire this morning."
Did that annoy you?
And what annoyed me is that, because it was the feeling that I would get doing things like Idol and big TV like that, is I have to get up to such an RPM to operate at that capacity.
Mm.
I would then just go the rest of my day gritting my teeth and clenching my
Right.
fists, because I just was unable to sustain.
Yeah.
If I didn't have, I'm doing live breakfast radio, so I have an ability, there's an output, right? It's easy.
Mm.
You talk 3 straight hours nonstop, you've got a place to put that energy out. When that goes away, it was over. I couldn't do it. No wonder I used to fucking drink so much. I have
Yeah.
since learned, like, once my brain got a lot healthier, I've learned a lot more about how to access that space and be able to handle it, get my brain
Yeah.
to that point where it has to move that quickly, and then how to come back down from that. But when we were working together, I didn't know how to do that.
It was just nice seeing you have emotion and not being on one level. Like, I don't mean that as a bad no, but, like, in all honesty, like, I just felt like you were alive, and that's probably why I text you, and I can't remember that morning exactly, but I remember just going I could see sometimes that you used to be robotic, and I found a hard time with that. I was like, "Where's my Osh?" Like, that's just it was that real disconnection, and sometimes I just knew that you wanted to, like, even cry, and you just didn't even have that ability, you know? Like, it was
Meds,
just
yeah.
this
Some meds have benefits and side effects,
yeah, 100%.
The benefits were that I wasn't seeing shit and hearing
Yeah.
shit,
Yeah.
and I wasn't dealing with the suicidality all day. The side effects is I was putting on about 1 kilo a week, and the world felt like blue tack. There was
Yeah.
no light or shade. There was no sharp edges. There was no smooth surfaces. It was just all one color. And that gets tiring after a while.
Mhm.
And I got, thankfully, brilliantly, I cry now.
Yeah.
It is incredible. With all that experience of being, of the men and the, men of power in the workplaces you've been, and the other men of power that you'd encountered throughout your life,
Mm.
when Finney shows up, oh, I've got a son.
Yeah.
What starts going through your head around what kind of man's he going to become?
So when I was, in labor, and I do regret this big time, I got induced because I was trying to work around, hours of the radio station because we didn't have any maternity leave, and I just started a new job. So it literally allowed myself and I regret this so much because I completely had postnatal depression as a result of it. Like it was stupid, but so I only had 2 weeks off. So I'd organized to have induced so that I could, spend time for 2 weeks before I go back to work. And I was in the hospital, and with all my sort of, I guess, experience and the love I still got from my parents, but still had such difficulties, I, was in a really quick labor because they had induced it, and I said to Scott, "I don't want a girl. I don't want a girl. We have to wrap this up because I might be having a girl," because we didn't know what gender we were having. He's like, "What is going on?" I was like, I don't want, like, I can't have a me." And he's like, "Okay, can we talk about it later?" And I was like, "I can't." And I just remember saying to my friend, like I called her, my friend Jenna, I was like, "This is I need to go home. I might be having a girl." And she's like, "Do you know?" And I'm like, "No." She's like, "When are the contractions? Can you put on a midwife?" I'm like, "No, I'm packing up." And must have been a little bit crazy by it on meds. But then when I had a boy, I think I was just so excited because I've never seen, I don't know, I never seen men as evil, women as evil. It's just, it's the person. And I honestly mean that. I think it's the way that we are raised by it. But I very early on was like, and it's not that I'm not gender specific, but I remember a saying, and I forgot who said it, but it was like, we're trying to raise our daughters to be more like men, but who would be brave enough to raise our son like we do our daughters? And that sort of stuck with me of going, I don't have a specific way of how they should be. And I have 3 boys, and a girl at tennis came up to me the other day, and she was really upset because all these photos of, that people had taken their daughters to see Taylor Swift. And she was so upset because she's like, "I just don't have that connection to be able to take, I don't have a daughter." And I went, "Why didn't you take your son?" And she's like, "Well," I said, "What would they not like Taylor? Like, it's an amazing concert." She's like, "Oh, well, I don't know." And I said, "Well, I took my son to go and see Pink." She's like, "Did he wanna go?" I said, "Well, I don't know. I'd probably never ask my kids." I actually say it like this. I go, "I would love to see Pink, and I would love your company. Would you come with me?" And they go, "Of course." Because it's not a girl icon, it's not a boy icon, it's experience. So I guess I never really thought about how I would specifically raise a man into the world. I just know very early on that I want to raise them that they can experience all, and I want to raise them to respect themselves because I feel like people that respect themselves don't harm other people. So that's something that I've really wanted to do, and to respect themselves is to be proud to be a male. Of course, they should be proud to be a male. I'm proud to be a girl. Um, so I guess it's just what I've always thought about having 3 boys is it's never like, how am I gonna raise them to, I guess, avoid what men have done to me, because I think the only way to do that is just to raise someone with respect.
There's a moment, I remember you speaking about it because I'm number 2 of 4 boys.
Yes, yes. And you gave me advice
So
that I wanna talk about later.
yeah, what is that?
You said to me, "I feel like we were raised in a competition."
Yeah,
And
yeah,
that really hurt me because I was like, "Oh, I really want my boys to be close." And I think
yeah.
that come into it, you know what I mean? Like, it does, where you feel like you wanna compete, but I feel like you can compete that with different genders, but
Yeah, we figured it out as adults, we
yeah,
figured it out,
no, of
but as
course.
kids,
Yeah, of course. But I go, I really I want them to be close, and you can never force it. You really can't, you know? They grow up with different personalities and different life experiences, and it's not always gonna be, but I always want them to be a part of each other's life. So I feel like I might sort of maybe, something happens at school and I'm like, "Oh my god, your brother would love to hear about that." Do you know what I mean? So they'll go into their room and go, "Hey, hey, do you know this happened?" And he's like, "Oh, that's so cool." So I will always encourage them to be a part of each other's lives, and they will come and watch the other one play sport, and I'll try and sometimes encourage them to do different sports rather than all forcing them to play, to be the same one. And I feel like sometimes we can kind of to control them in some aspects to be able to be part of each other's lives, and whether that's going to continue or not. But just remember you saying that, and I was like, "Oh, that's gonna really bother me if they."
when you, when you were describing the wrestling matches happening in your living room,
Yeah.
like, yes, you're someone that grew up with brothers, so you understand that kind of stuff, but when it's these kids, it really surprised Audrey when Wolfie was young because Georgia was tutus and tiaras from the
Yes.
moment
Yeah.
she could stand,
Yeah.
alright? And then Wolf is, like, barely able to walk, and he's knocking shit over,
Yeah.
and Audrey's like,
Yeah.
"The fuck is that?" I was like, that's Bam Bam, it's
Oh,
what happens."
I was that person that got, let's do dolls. I have like this little kitchen, let's do like cooking stuff. So we're not specifically just giving them boys' toys. And the girls would get thrown around, the kitchen stuff has just been bang it's like my boys walk into the room and say, what can we fuck up here?" Like, it's just what boys do. There is a different energy, and I remember I had only had 2, and I took them out for breakfast, and one of my friends was pregnant, and I was just up all the time, and they were sort of running around, and she looked over at the 2, my friend who has 2 girls that were just sitting there and they were doing colouring in, and she had tears in her eyes and she's like, "Oh, I'm sorry, Abby, I don't want boys." I was like, "No, I get it. I totally get it." But I love the chaos and I love the mess, but I feel like you might try and guide them and kind of go, yeah, but they are very different. There is so much energy, and my whole afternoons is involved around sport now, like sport, 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 sport. Because there was a rain day last night, and them at home, it's like my husband come home and was like, "Why didn't you just get him computer games?" I'm like, "Because we don't do computer games during the week." He's like, "Yeah, but I just feel like we can't get the house smashed up anymore."
Yeah, that pressure valve, it's a yeah. Yeah, it's such a different thing, to be in the body. I don't remember what it was to be in the body of a young guy,
Yeah,
and as puberty kicks in, which you're close to finding out with, or if not already finding out with
yeah,
Finney,
yeah,
you're suddenly, like, at the start of the summer versus the end of the summer, you'll be 15 kilos heavier,
yeah.
and, like, just shoot, you just you explode, and now suddenly you're now driving a V8 when you were in, like, this four-cylinder stick shift,
Do you know when I
but
go
you've got the same brain capacity.
it just doesn't matter. See, when I go to, school pickup, and especially with my youngest 2, because 'cause they're not too ashamed, and they run up and give me a hug, I kneel down on the floor because I know that if I don't kneel down, my feet are gonna be swiped up from around me and I'll lay. So I lay down, I kneel down on the ground so that I hug them so I don't fall over because there's just so much like, "Ah."
Yeah. And I think that certainly in recent times, I've been thinking about this a lot, because young Wolfie, he's 4.5, and you see what happens, and the research is so clear about what happens with w- the first couple of years, 5 years or so of the young
Mm,
boys' lives, and how that plays out into perhaps very poor choices when they're older, um, around emotional regulation, around lashing out, or very
like
making
how
risky
all
decisions.
emotion will go to anger as opposed to showing.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And so when Wolfie's, it's just so top of mind, and you don't want to fuck it up, but you also
You know
you
what? If we're
gotta
so
just
focused on that, we'll, like, get that
yeah.
right, and then we'll fuck them up in another way.
Oh yeah, I know, right? But it is so 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 vital, these just precious minutes that you have with them while they're awake, and this little, because they won't be this awake and this little tomorrow.
I'm finding
But
that really hard now with my eldest, he's 12, and feel like, and there's so many, books on this, and I know you've spoken to Maggie Denton as well, who's a wonderful author about raising boys. She has 4 boys, and it, like, plays on my mind that you've always had this influence over them, and now I'm losing that influence because friends are so important, and I've found that really hard to let go of, and he'll even say, like, I'll say, "Who's the biggest influence in your life now?" And he'll be like, "My friends." And he's open, and we've got a hugely open communication with him. My middle one I need to work on because he's very much like harder, I guess, to talk with about it. But it's amazing when you're like, I said to him, you don't have a phone, by the way. You have my phone that you're borrowing, so you don't have any privacy. I'm going to check it. And even so much, I'll have to say, "Hey, I just don't like the way that that text thread came along." And he's like, "Please don't call their mum." You know what I mean? But I was like, I want to be able to go, "Hey, this, the way you're talking, like, not appropriate." And it's hard to sort of say how much influence you're going to have over it because I'm taking a step back now, and that's hard for me because I'm not the most important person in his life anymore.
yeah, they do come back.
Yeah.
You just my when Georgia came into my life, there was a mate of mine who had older kids, and he and I were talking about exactly this, and he said, "Yeah, they're going to ignore you, but it's your job to always be there for
Yeah.
them to ignore."
Yes, I love that. See, it feels like just the other day that you were wanting, this is when we started working together, you were wanting to learn how to do George's hair. Do you know, like, that's how quickly she's grown up. Yeah, she doesn't want you to braid her hair, but that's how many years ago, like, you just realize how quickly they do.
Oh, in a blink of an eye, Abby, in a blink of an eye.
Yeah.
She's 20. She's over 6 foot tall. She doesn't like us talking about it. She's very tall.
Yeah.
She teaches like 8 Pilates classes a day. She goes to uni. She's
Wow.
like amazing, amazing. I'm so proud of her. Um, when you are, looking at 3 young boys, and you look at what, there's healthy and unhealthy masculinity,
Yeah.
and I know that you're quite involved with, Small Steps for Hannah. Tell me about what it was. I mean, for people who don't know the story. But tell me about what it was about that made you go, I've got to weigh in on this.
So, for anyone that doesn't know, Small Steps for Hannah was a foundation that was started after on the 19th of February 2020 when Hannah, Aaliyah, Leanna, and Trey lost their lives as a result of they were burnt in a car by their dad and her ex, and that was around the corner from where I live. So, when we first heard it on the news, we were like, "Wait a minute, that's the kids' school, that's right around the corner." So, it was right in my area, and then I guess I looked up, I don't know, I'm like forever one of those detectives. I looked her up on Instagram and I realized that she'd followed me on Instagram and I realized who she was. I bumped into her at our local bottle shop and I remember saying, "Look, if you and your fit bod are having a drink, then us, in my tracky pants, I'm able to have a drink." So I remember who she was because she was asking me to go to the gym because I had this conversation because, I like to chat to strangers. And I just sort of was like, I wasn't a part of her life, but she was liking photos of me and my kids. And I thought, wow, isn't it? You don't know people following you, what they're going through. Do you know what I mean? It was just that weird connection. And having three boys, I wanted to, I guess, raise them in a world of it's really scary to be a male. It's really scary to be a female, but it's really scary about what does it actually mean to be a male. And then the other reason is I've worked in media for so many years and I've just been really, really frustrated with the way that domestic violence is reported on. And I say that because if there was a murder, and we say there is a murder, and no one knows that they were related or have a connection, then there's this fear and outrage of how this individual, this violent individual, could affect me. But then once it is learnt that it's domestic violence situation, it is sadly somehow softened as if the community isn't to fear. And I've always thought that's really quite strange. I realise what point did we get where domestic violence is a softening of violence? So for me, I sort of just reached out and said, if there's anything you guys need, let me be a part of it. I can MC anything, let me know. And then they did and said, well, actually, would love you to come on board with as an ambassador. So I've got to know Sue and Lloyd quite well, which is Hannah's parents, and they are the most unbelievable people, like unbelievable what they've done to campaign for coercive control laws that are getting changed here in Queensland. I know they want them to be changed all over the world. It's what's happened over in the UK many, many years ago. So I guess I just wanted to do anything that they needed to be able to help out. And I love what the foundation is doing because there's a lot of different charities that are really good and they know that, but they understand the complexities of it. They understand that perpetrators need to get help. They understand that we need to do what we can to stop people being perpetrators, which is have the education at schools and learn from a really young age about what's healthy relationships, what is respect as well. Um, and that's something that they're rolling out this year at schools, which is probably something that I'm the most passionate about. So yeah, there's many reasons why I wanted to come on board, and I just what the foundation has achieved in a short time is absolutely amazing.
When you think about that, when what we can do, yeah, education, massive point, massive play. What is it that you do with your boys? And you've got one who's 12.
Yeah,
He's his body's going to start pointing in various directions where you know he may seek some sort of connection physically. It's going to happen.
yeah.
It's going to happen. How do you speak to your boys about this?
I was saying this when I was hosting an event for it just last week for the International Women's Day, and I was like, I actually encourage you to tell your kids where you've been today. Like that's to be honest, like you go away to an event like this and you don't say what you were. It's a domestic violence thing, and you do it in an age related way. But you're saying that a man murdered his children and his wife in a really horrible act because he couldn't control himself and couldn't go and get help. And that's the way that I probably explained it to them. And they'll ask questions and I will answer them in an appropriate way. But I never ignore it or never don't talk about it. And I do talk about how, and this is kids lose their temper. You know what I mean? And it's not just about that, but I kind of go, I get concerned about their anger and ability to control it. So I guess that's one thing that we've always talked about it. And it's not saying it's going to extend to that, But it's like, let's take a step back and let's talk about how we really feel about it. And often it's not to do with anger. Often they do burst into tears. So I guess the one thing that I've done is to try and talk about what healthy emotions are, because I do believe that people can get anger, but I don't believe rage is normal. You can get jealous, but then this overwhelming desire to hurt someone as a result of it is not okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like anything that kids learn how to do. It's like really, really big feelings, like,
Yeah.
I don't know, the humiliation of being dumped,
Yes.
like,
Yes, and to
on
deal
a
with
bus in
rejection.
front of
Yeah.
everyone, and then everyone's tagged you in every photo with their new partner, and, like,
Yeah.
that is huge. That's like trying to learn how to juggle a chainsaw, a bowling ball, and an apple and only taking a bite out of the apple. Like,
Yeah.
it's hard. You need practice learning to deal with that kind of feeling. If you've never had that practice
Yeah.
or you've never been shown how to deal with it, when it happens for the first time, you're gonna default
Yeah.
to defense, which can often look like, anger or
But
rage,
I'll still talk
and
about my big feelings now. So if something happens to me, I'll
yeah.
go, "Guys, I'm not good at the moment." You know what I mean? And they're like, "Oh, okay, okay." And like sometimes my son will actually hold my hand and say, "Do you want to breathe?" Like, but also I'll talk about, I'll go, "Oh, mate, I am really jealous of what's happened on another radio station," or something along those lines. So I'm actually expressing it because I feel a lot. Like I feel huge emotions. I am blessed with the most short attention span that you could possibly imagine. So I get over it really quickly. But I feel like if we don't feel it, then we're sort of pushing it down. It's coming to the surface. We're pushing it down. It's coming to the surface. But if you actually allow yourself to complete body feel it, and actually go, "Oh, emotions are really not something to be scared about. It's actually energy." You know what I mean? Like, they're awful, but it's actually energy. My nanny used to always say to me, like, "Are you happy? Are you happy?" And I was like, "Well, I can't maintain happy 24/7, but I also can't maintain anger 24/7." Do you know what I mean? Like, it's just energy that sort of goes through you. So for me, I really want to teach the boys about emotions because I don't think we talk about it enough, and how they can be indicators about what's going on in our life. And is there coping ways of how we can deal about it? Whether I'm getting it right or not, I don't know. That's my constant thing that I'll stay awake at 1 in the morning, thinking about. But if I can't, then I will often go, okay, wait a minute. Let's see if I can try and get some help from here. Let's see if I can try and Google some answers for this. But the biggest thing that we kind of do is I don't want to be a perfect parent. I want to be able to learn with them. And this is the first time I've done it. It's the first time they've been kids. So we're going to get it wrong. We're going to get it right. But I do often go, guys, the way I actually reacted to that was really wrong. It was really wrong. The way that I yelled at your dad like that, it was really inappropriate. I really apologized to him and I really don't want to do that again. So there's so many different ways that I could do it, and I can tell you what I'm trying to do next time. So
I'm not gonna say it's nice to hear that after being married nearly 15 years, you still yell at Scott,
yeah.
but that you're able to talk about it is probably one of the reasons you're still married and it's nearly 15 years.
Yeah, well, I'll be like I said something happened the other day, and I was away, for work. Yeah, I was in Daydream Island, so I can understand how it wasn't for work. And I came back and there was like I was nitpicking with stuff. And I was like, "What is wrong with you?" Because he was really quite rude to me, and he's like, "Well, actually, I'm really annoyed. I've came back. I did the best job that I could, and it feels like you're nitpicking, and it really offended me." And I was like, "You're 100% right, babe. Like, I'm really sorry, and I love you." And I kinda go it's that thing where we sort of but I was like, if we both allow ourselves to be honest with how we're feeling, the kids see that. Like, they take in so much, and if you're bickering, so be it. As long as you're not bickering constantly over the same things and not finding an end to it. So that's something that I always wanna be able to show to the kids is we are getting an end to it.
Is that the key for you and Scott? Is that how 15 years and 3 kids and wild career shifts has managed to happen?
Um He's always been like, "We always find a way." It was always his thing when I was like, "Oh, this always gets a bit too much. This always gets a bit," he's like, "We always find a way." Um, you just go through different moments in life. I think, you go through moments where one person's more into the other than the other person is. I think that is true where it's not falling out of love with each other at the same time. And do I do love him, like, I still get excited when he walks into the room. I think marriage is completely long if you're not getting butterflies, by the person that you're marrying, then maybe you're sort of marrying the wrong person. Um, but I still get excited with his company, and we still sort of enjoy it, and I think when things just get a little bit chaotic, have to take that moment to reconnect. We're both very physical people as well, so I guess we've always had that. And I will never let the hugs stop because I think that's really important.
You have been so generous today, staying up this late to talk to me and giving yourself about 48 minutes between now and pickup to to do this. I've wanted to have you on this show for so long, and I'm just so grateful that we waited till now. Um, because the way that we've spoken today, I really hope people get a lot out. I think they will. I think people get a lot out of this, and you've been so generous, and you're a fucking superstar.
I've got a lot out of from being friends with you. You really are like a fountain of knowledge. I mean, there's obviously things that annoy you, annoy me, and obviously things about me, I'm sure that annoy you. But like the ability to be able to work with you, I honestly go for all the tough times. It was really amazing, I guess, to learn so much. But you are the sort of person that does teach people a lot about themselves through you being so open and honest. I even just working with you for that short period of time, I did learn a lot about myself.
Well, I'm one thing I love about this rapidly shrinking and ever so moving industry that we both work in
Yeah.
is that you'll always work with everyone you've always worked with.
Yeah,
So
yeah, yeah.
I have no doubt that we will work together in some capacity again, and I really can't wait for that
We
day.
might have to get more grumpy and then we can work on AM.
No, I'm on the pathway out of that. Please give your husband a
I
cuddle
will.
and give your kids a tap on the bum. You're the best. Thanks, Abby.
You're the best.